So in this part of the review, we're going to be focusing on questions 33 through 40, which is going over graphing linear functions and all the different linear functions equations. This is the review that's going to focus what we covered this past grading period. Question 33 is telling us to complete the table so that it represents a direct variation and then state the equation. Direct variation is going to be an equation that's written in the form of y equals kx. So very similar to a linear function where we have a slope, but there's y-intercept is always going to be 0. That's the constant, which is like the slope, can be found by taking the y value and dividing by the x value. This is different from finding slope because we're looking for just y over x and not the change of y over the change of x. So we come over and we take a look at our table and we see we do have an x and a y value that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and take my 12, which is the y value, and put it in the numerator. And then put my 3, which is the x value, and put it in the denominator. And then we can simplify or reduce this fraction. So we see it as 12 divided by 3, and that's going to come out to 4. So our constant has a value of 4, which means we have an equation of y equals 4x, where we are placing this 4 in place of the constant from our equation. Now that we have an equation, we can go ahead and find our missing values by substituting the x values. So the first x value that we're going to use is 0. 0 is going to go in place of x. So I have y is going to equal 4 times 0, and 4 times 0 is 0. So this y value is 0, and then we have y equals 4 times our next x value, which is 1, and 4 times 1 is 4. So our next y value is 4. Notice in the table that it's going through 0, 0, which is the origin. All direct variations go through the origin, which is why there's no y-intercept listed. Question 34 is telling us to write an equation in point-slope form. And the point that we're being given is 2, negative 12. The slope is negative 1/3. So the formula for point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And you will have access to the formula chart when you take your exam. The y1 and the x1 are representing points, the coordinates from the point, and our point is 2 to negative 12. So I can go ahead and label that as x1 and y1. Then we have the m is our slope. The slope we know is negative 1/3. So I'm going to go ahead and label that as well as m. From here, we're going to input the values. So I have y minus y1, which is a negative 12, equals m, which is our slope, which is negative 1/3, times x minus our x coordinate, which is 2. Now we substitute our values in, but we don't want to have two operations back to back. And so a minus negative will always change to a positive. And then from here, we can go ahead and stop because all we were asked to do is to input this in point slope form. Question 35, we're asked to take the equation y minus 4 equals 6 times x minus 3 into slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is going to be y equals mx plus b. So our goal is to get this y all alone, and then also the right half where we can identify the slope and the y-intercept. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is go ahead and rewrite this so we have space to work. Make sure that if you have to rewrite an equation that you double check to make sure that everything has been written correctly. Sometimes you'll leave out a negative or a parenthesis that will throw the rest of the problem off. Okay, so we want to get the y by itself. So our first step that I recommend you do is to go ahead and draw a line through the equal sign. This is just to reinforce whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And then we need to go ahead and distribute. So this is 6 times x, which is 6x. And then 6 times negative 3, which is negative 18. Everything else is going to remain the same. Once again, double check, make sure everything's written correctly. Then you can go and proceed in getting the y by itself. To get rid of the negative 4, we have to add 4 to both sides. And this is going to come out to y, these 4's cancel out, equals 6x. And then negative 18 plus 4 comes out to negative 14. And then we can see this is in slope-intercept form. We have y equals 6x minus 14. 6 would be the slope. Negative 14 is the y-intercept. Question 36, we're told the graph is showing the relationship between the number of hours and the cost for an auto repair. And we can see that we have the labeling, the x-axis is representing the hours of labor, where the y is representing the cost for the auto repair. The question here is asking us to identify the y-intercept, describe what it means, along with the slope. So starting off with the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. We have this point. The coordinates are 0, 120. So we can determine what the meaning of the y-intercept is by looking at the x-coordinate is 0, x is hours of labor. So with 0 hours of labor, we're still going to have to pay $120. So we have an initial fee of $120. Before any work starts on the car, $110 will need to be paid up front. The next part is going to be to identify the slope. So once again, when you're looking at a graph, you want to look at the change of y or the change of x, or the rise over the run. So I have 0, 120, and then I have 180. So this is going up. This is not 2 units. You're going from 120 to 180. So this is an increase of 60. And you're going over 1 hour. So the slope is 60 or 60 over 1. Remember, this is the change in Y. So this is the cost of auto. So it's going to be $60 every 1 hour. The denominator is 1. 1 is the X values, the change in X. X is the hours of labor. So this is $6 per hour. So we have our initial fee of 120, and then every hour that the car is being worked on after that is going to be an additional $60. Question 37, we need to identify the x-intercept along with the y-intercept. So this is going to be more, do you remember or understand the vocab? The x-intercept is always going to be wherever the y value is 0. So we look at the table, we're looking at the y column to be 0, which is right here, which means the x-intercept is negative 30. So I can write this as negative 30, comma 0. The second part is going and asking us to identify the y-intercept. The y-intercept is going to be wherever the x value is 0. So I come back and I look at the table. Under the x column, here's my 0, which means 15 is going to be the y-intercept. So I can go ahead and write that as 0, 15. Question 38, we're being asked to write the equation 3x plus 5y equals negative 15 in slope-intercept form. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So the first thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and rewrite the equation so that we have space to work it out. You also want to double check and make sure that everything has been written correctly. No negatives or variables have been left out. Then I'm going to go ahead and draw my line through the equal sign to remind us whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So our goal is to get this y by itself. Right now, the first step is going to be to get rid of this entire first term. Because we're getting rid of the whole term of 3x, we're going to subtract. Right now it's positive, so the inverse would be to subtract. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. This is going to have 3x minus 3x cancel out, leaving us with a positive 5y equals, and then this is going to be negative 3x minus 15. Because they are not like terms, they cannot be combined. Now we can go ahead and divide everything by 5. And when we do that, the 5's on the left cancel out, leaving us just with y. Negative 3x divided by 5, that cannot be divided evenly. So I'm going to leave it as a fraction, negative 3/5. Then we have our variable x. And then it's going to be negative 15 divided by 5, which is a negative 3. So we have our equation in slope-intercept form. The slope is negative 3/5 x. The y-intercept is negative 3. Question number 39. A parking meter gives 30 minutes for each quarter and 6 minutes for each nickel. The equation 30x plus 6y equals 60 is going to describe the number of quarters x and the number of nickels y that are needed to park for 60 minutes. And then we have our question, what does the x-intercept represent and the y-intercept represent? So I'm going to go ahead and start off with finding the x-intercept. the x-intercept, so I got to see, okay, x is representing our quarters, and we're given this equation to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that. 30x plus 6y equals 60. When we're looking for the x-intercept, the y value is 0. Okay. So in our ordered pair, I'm going to have a 0 in place of y. This is where I said that we could do the cover-up method. So if y has a value of 0, I can take this and substitute in place of y. And when I do that, I'm left with 30x equals 60. And then when we go ahead and divide both sides by 30, the 30s will cancel out, leaving us x equals 2. So my x-intercept is 2, 0. And this means we need 2. X is representing the quarters. Two quarters, 0 nickels. For 60 minutes of parking. The next part is going and finding the y-intercept. So the y value is representing our number of nickels, and we're going to use the same equation. So I have 30x plus 6y equals 0. Once again, the y-intercept means we have an x value of 0. So if I take my x value 0 and I substitute in place of the x value, this will cancel out completely, leaving us with 6y equals, that should be 60. That's 60. And then we go ahead and divide both sides by 6, giving us a y value of 10. So this means we need 10 nickels zero quarters for 60 minutes of parking. Question 40 is asking us to determine the slope and the y-intercepts of all these equations below. So this is where you need to make sure that you understand what form the equations are given to you in. This first equation, y equals 3x minus 2. The y is by itself. And we have our 3x minus 2, which is representing mx plus b. So this first equation is in slope intercept form. So we don't need to do any work. We're just going to go ahead and identify our slope is 3 and our y-intercept is negative 2. The second equation, y plus 2 equals 2/3 times the sum of x and 6. This is our point slope. So we know our slope, but we don't know the y-intercept. We're going to need to go ahead and solve or distribute first and then move the 2. So here, first step, negative, not negative, 2/3 times x, which is going to be 2 over 3x. And then we have 2/3 times 6. And 2/3 times 6 is going to come out to 4. And then the front is still the same. We're going to go ahead and our next step is going to be to subtract 2 from both sides. When we do that, we're left with y. 2 minus 2 cancels out, equals 2 over 3x plus 2. So our slope is 2/3, which is what we started off with. Did not change, so that means that's good. And then our y-intercept is 2. The last one, this is given to us, this is standard form. When it's in standard form, we don't know our slope, nor do we know our y-intercept. So we're going to need to go ahead and put this in slope-intercept form as well. Our first step here is going to be subtracting 3x from both sides, because we want the entire term to be moved. 3x minus 3x cancels out, leaving us with a negative 2y. Make sure you include that negative that's there. Equals negative 3x plus 6. From here, our next step is going to be to divide everything by a negative 2. Negative 2y divided by negative 2. The negative 2's cancel out, leaving us just with y equals negative 3x divided by negative 2. A negative over negatives becomes a positive, so we have positive 3/2 x. And then 6 divided by negative 2 is a negative 3. In this case, we have a slope of 3 over 2 and a y-intercept of negative 3.